Almost every web page on the internet has links to other pages or websites. To create these links, we use the anchor element. So we type A, that is short for anchor, and then press tab. Now every anchor element should have an href attribute. Href is short for hypertext reference. I know, it's a mouthful. It basically means a URL or a link. So for this demo, I'm going to create a second page called about.html and then link to it over here. So here in the Explorer panel, let's add a new page called about.html. Now here we're going to create a basic HTML boilerplate. Remember how to do that? We type an exclamation mark and then press tab. That's it. Beautiful. Now back to index.html. Here we can use a relative or an absolute URL. What do you mean by that? Well, a relative URL starts from the current page. So currently we are on index.html and we want to go to about.html. Now, currently both these pages are in the same folder. So we can type a relative URL to about.html like this, about.html. That's a relative URL. Now, what if about.html was in a different folder? So let's add a new folder to our project called company, and then move about to this folder. Now, where is about.html relative to the current page? It's inside the company folder, right? So here we type company/about.html. This is a relative URL. Now let's give this link a text. I'm going to say about me. So we type our text inside the anchor element, okay? Save the changes, back to the browser. Here's our link, click, and we're currently on the about page, which is empty. Beautiful. Now back to our home page. Instead of a text, we can also use an image. So I'm going to delete about me and add an image element. So img tab. Once again, here we can type a relative URL to our target image. So I'm going to go with images/mosh.jpg. Now save. Take a look. Obviously, this image is way too big. We can always use CSS to resize it. But that aside, look at the mouse icon when we hover over this image. It changed to a hand to indicate that this image is clickable, okay? Now, back to our code. To keep things simple, I'm going to get rid of this image and get back to our text, about me. Now let's go to the about page and add a link back to the home page. So over here, we're going to add an anchor element. What should we type for the href attribute? Well, currently we are inside the company folder. We have to go one level up so we can access index.html, right? To do that, we type double periods and a /. With this, we can go one level up. Now at this level, which is the root of our website, we have the company folder, the images folder, and index.html. So we can reference index.html. And for the text, we're going to say homepage. Again, this is another example of a relative URL because it starts from the current page and goes somewhere else. Now, if we're inside a deeply nested folder structure, we might have to go multiple levels up. So double period and a /, then we repeat and repeat. With this, we can go 3 levels up. Now, as you can see, URLs like this kind of look messy. They look hard to read. In those cases, we can use an absolute URL. So we start with a /, and this represents the root of our website. Now, at this level, we have access to index.html. So this is an absolute URL, okay? Now, back to index.html. Here we are linking to an HTML document, but we can also link to non-HTML documents like images, PDFs, PowerPoints, and so on. So let's add a link to my image. So for the href, I'm going to say images/mosh.jpg. And for the text, I'm going to say my photo. Save. Take a look. So here's our second link. Click. My image is displayed in the browser. But what if I want to prompt the user to download it? That's very easy. We're going to add the download attribute to our anchor element. So we type download, press enter. Now this attribute doesn't have a value, so we can remove the double quotes and the equal sign. So we just add the attribute name. Now save, back to the browser, we go back. Here we have to manually refresh the page because the live server only refreshes the current page. Now previously we were on my image, so that was the URL that live server refreshed. So here we refresh to get the latest changes. Now when I click on this link, instead of seeing my image, we're going to see my image getting downloaded. Take a look. Click, and here's my image. Beautiful. Now we can also link to other parts of this page. So let's create two sections with a lot of text. So I'm going to add an H2 element. And of course, I missed the H1, but let's not worry about it. For this H2, we're going to say HTML. And below that, we're going to add some dummy text with 200 words. So paragraph, lorem, 200. Good. Now, right after that, we're going to add another H2 for the CSS section with some more text. Okay. Let's save the changes. Take a look. As you can see, the CSS section is below the fold. So we have to scroll down to see it. What we can do here is on the top, we can add a link to the CSS section. So when the user clicks on that, they will immediately jump to the CSS section. That is very easy. So here's the CSS section. First, we have to give this element a unique identifier. Just like everyone in the real world can have a unique identifier, like a driver's license or a passport, every element on a page can also have a unique identifier. So here I'm going to set the ID attribute to CSS, or we can use a more descriptive name like section-CSS. The name doesn't really matter here. What matters is that we're defining what is called a fragment or a place on this page. Now, we're going to add a link to this fragment. So on the top, let's add another anchor element. Now for the href, we're going to type a # followed by the name of our fragment, which is section-CSS. And for the text, we're going to say CSS. Now, back to the browser, take a look. I'm going to click on this. We immediately jump to the CSS section. Beautiful. Now, a lot of websites like this also have a link that helps you jump to the top of the page. Let's see how we can create that. So after the CSS section, I'm going to add another anchor element. Now for the href, I'm going to use an empty fragment. So we just type a # without an identifier. And then we say jump to top. Take a look. So here's our link. Click, and now we're on top of the page. Now let's see how we can link to external websites. So let's add another anchor element to link to Google. Now what should we type here? Well, google.com is a different website. So here we cannot use a relative URL. We have to use an absolute URL. But if you start with a /, we're referencing the root of our website. But in this case, we want to go to a different website. How can we do that? Well, we have to start with the protocol. So https://google.com. Now let's type Google and test our page. Click. We're on Google. Beautiful. Now, sometimes when linking to external websites, we want that link to open in a new browser window or a new tab. Let me show you how to do that. So here's our anchor. We set the target attribute to _blank. Save. Now, back to the homepage. Once again, we have to manually refresh to get the latest changes. Okay. Now, when I click on Google, you see a new tab. Beautiful. And one last thing. We can also link to emails. So I'm going to add an anchor. And for href, I'm going to say mail to programmingwithmosh@gmail.com. Email me. Save the changes. Now, back to our page. When I click on this link, my mail client will open and my email address will be pre-populated. Take a look. So click, and here's my mail client. So this is all about links. Now, one last thing before we finish this lesson. What is the difference between a link and a hyperlink? Well, a link is just an address, a URL, the location of the target page. A hyperlink is the element that the user can click on to navigate to that target page. That is the difference between a link and a hyperlink. But quite often, these terms are used interchangeably. All right, we're done with this lesson. Next, we're going to talk about images. All right, now let's talk about embedding images in a bit more detail. For this lesson, I'm going to grab an image from unsplash.com, which is where we can find a lot of beautiful and freely usable images. So let's search for coffee. There are tons of coffee pictures here. I'm going to grab this picture. We can download it for free. Now look, this image comes in different sizes, small, medium, and large. For now, we're going to grab this image in a small size, but in the future, we're going to talk about embedding images at different sizes depending on the device. So on mobile devices, we want to serve a smaller image, and on desktop computers, we want to serve a larger image. For now, let's not worry about these complexities. We'll have a complete section on this topic later on. So let's download the small image. Now it says, say thank you to Nathan. Thanks, Nathan. This is a beautiful picture. You have done a great job. Now I'm going to drag and drop this image onto the images folder and then rename it to coffee. We want to give it a descriptive name. This is a small search engine optimization tip. When we provide descriptive names for our images, search engines can better understand and index our pages, okay? So here's our image. Now, let's add an image element. We set the source to images/coffee.jpg. Now, what about the alt attribute? Well, I briefly mentioned that we use this attribute to provide textual description of the image. It's not compulsory, but is highly recommended for a number of reasons. The first reason is to make our page accessible to visually impaired people. These people use a screen reader to read the web out to them. So with this alternative text, we can tell them what we are showing on the page. And that means we should write a good, meaningful description here, like a coffee mug on a table. Don't write something like image or image1. That is pointless. Now, the second benefit of providing an alternative text is that we help search engines read this text and understand what we're providing here. And there's one more benefit. If this image cannot be loaded for some reason, the alternative text is shown. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to add a typo here. Now, back to the browser. Look, the image is not loaded, but we see the alternative text. This can also happen if there is a network connectivity issue. If the user gets disconnected, they can still see the alternative text. So let's remove the typo. Now let's talk about sizing images. As I told you before, we can use CSS to resize our images. So here in the head section, let's add a style element and apply a rule to our image. Now this rule is applied to all images on the page. This is probably not something we want to do in a real-world scenario. In a real-world scenario, we want to apply a class to this element and then define rules for that class. We'll talk about this in more detail in the future. So for now, let's give this image a width of 200 pixels and a height of 200 pixels. Now, there's a tiny problem in our image. Can you tell? Our image is kind of squashed. Here's the reason. We're dealing with a rectangular image. Look, this is a rectangular image, but we're converting it to a square image. Now look at the shape of this coffee mug. It's kind of round, right? Like compared with what we have over here. Our image is vertically squashed. Let me show you another way to verify this. We can right-click on the image and then go to Inspect. This opens Chrome DevTools and selects our image in the DOM. Now on the right side, we can see the styles that we apply to this element. Now I'm going to disable the height property, and I want you to pay close attention to the image and see how the shape changes. So look, now the coffee mug is more round, but if I apply the height property, it becomes squashed. So how can we solve this problem? Well, we have a new property in CSS called object fit. So here we can set object fit to one of these values. Most of the time we use cover, so the image covers its containing box. What is this containing box? Well, first let me set this to cover. Here we have this image element, right? Conceptually, there is a box around every element in an HTML document. We don't see this box, but the browser uses that box to figure out how the page should be displayed. So here we have a box with this dimension, 200 by 200. And in this box, we're trying to insert this image, right? Now, when we set object fit to cover, our image will get resized and potentially cropped so it covers the entire containing box. Let's verify this. So save the changes and back in the browser. Look, our coffee mug is round, but if I disable the object fit property, it gets squashed again. So object fit is a very useful property. Now we can always play with all possible values over here. So I'm going to select this, delete it. Now using the up and down arrows, we can go through this list and see the impact of every value. Now I'm not going to go over all these values and explain what they mean. This is pointless. You can always figure them out on your own. Just remember that most of the time we use cover. So the image covers the entire containing box. All right, this is all about the images for now. Next, we're going to talk about video and audio. Hey guys, Mosh here. I just wanted to let you know that this video you've been watching is the first hour of my Ultimate HTML and CSS series. So after you watch this video, if you want to learn more from me, you can enroll in the full course, which is about 13 hours long and covers everything you need to know to build professional quality websites with HTML and CSS. It also includes summary notes, exercises, a real project, a certificate of completion you can add to your resume, and a 30-day money-back guarantee to get a refund if you're not satisfied. So you have nothing to lose and a lot to learn. So if you're interested, I put the link in the description box.